Hello, and thank you for watching this Hatfield Museum and History Society community program presentation titled The Rosenbergers and Their Hatfield Businesses. I'm Larry Stevens, President of the Society. The Rosenberger family has a long history here in Hatfield Township, but they have an even longer history in neighboring Franconia Township. It is a tradition of the Hatfield Rosenberger family that their descendants came from Germany, from a place called Zweibrücken. In the early 1900s, Heinrich Rosenberger and his family endured a horrific ocean voyage from the Old World to the port of Philadelphia. Early 1700s passenger ships were typically not purpose-built passenger vessels, but often freighters that accommodated passengers alongside of cargo, with journeys often delayed until a full load of cargo was ready. Passengers, especially those in steerage, endured cramped, uncomfortable, and poorly ventilated conditions. With no GPS, no accurate chronometers, and unreliable maps, sailors were forced to navigate with a compass, a sextant, celestial bodies, personal experience, and guesstimates. And then there was the weather. Sailors often had to deal with storms, icebergs, or fog. All of these factors could slow down the progress of a voyage. This meant that a trip across the Atlantic Ocean could take anywhere from 4 weeks to 6 months, depending on the weather. But given the overcrowded conditions on board, even the shortest voyage would seem to last forever. Back then, it was not uncommon for a good number of passengers to die of smallpox or dysentery during the voyage, leaving grief-stricken relatives to cast them overboard. Heinrich and at least 2 of his sons did survive the terrible voyage to the New World and disembarked at the port of Philadelphia and entered the thriving and growing port town. The streets of Philadelphia would have been filled with animals and pedestrians, as well as farmers from outlying areas bringing their produce to market. Heinrich surely didn't linger long in the bustling city, and soon headed northwestward to join with others in fledgling Mennonite settlements in the woodlands of northern Philadelphia County. The land was still covered with dense forests at this time, and the Lenape Indians still roamed the land, hunting and fishing to provide for their families. Heinrich Rosenberger, or as his name has been anglicized, Henry Rosenberger, soon settled on a piece of land in Franconia Township. He didn't own the land at first, but was permitted by the owner of the land to build on and farm the land. It appeared that Henry began promptly to clear and cultivate the land and to build a house and a barn. About a decade later, in 1729, Henry was able to purchase the 159-acre farm on which he had been living. Jumping ahead to 1739, one of Henry's sons, Daniel Rosenberger, left his father's farm on the increasingly congested lands of Franconia Township and followed some of his Mennonite brethren into the woodlands of what would become Hatfield Township to establish his own farm. Now keep in mind that this is an 1848 map, the earliest map we have of Hatfield. When Daniel relocated to Hatfield, it looked nothing like this. It looked more like this. This land, which became Hatfield Township, was still about 13 years from being named and was known only as lands adjacent to Montgomery Township. The only road through this land was what was known as the King's Highway, which later was known as the Bethlehem Pike. Cowpath Road would be opened the following year, but 40-foot road was still decades away. Although Daniel was the first Rosenberger to settle in this land of Hatfield, several of Henry Rosenberger's other sons would soon follow Daniel to Hatfield to begin farms of their own. And it wasn't long before the Rosenberger name was quite prominent among the landowners of Hatfield Township. Jumping forward again to 1899, William F. Rosenberger, the great-great-great-grandson of Heinrich Rosenberger, at the age of 25, purchased a 74-acre family farm located on Bergy Road in Hatfield Township from his sister and brother-in-law. It wasn't long before William and his wife Sally were blessed with two children, Eva, born in 1903, and Raymond, born in 1905. As Eva and Raymond grew older, they attended the Oak Grove Schoolhouse just a stone's throw away on Bergy Road for their elementary education. Their classmates were predominantly the children of other farmers that lived in the area. And like many of the children of that time, Eva and Raymond only pursued education up to the 8th grade. After all, book learning was of little use to those who were planning to live life as a farmer or farmer's wife. In 1921, Eva Rosenberger married Raymond Hackman, the son of Henry and Annie Hackman, who worked a farm on Funk's Road about 2 miles away and who were very close friends of the Rosenberger family. Newlyweds Eva and Raymond then set up housekeeping in one side of the Rosenberger homestead. Then, in January of 1923, Raymond Rosenberger took a wife, Sally Landis, who he had met while visiting the Franconia Mennonite Church. They also took up housekeeping in the Rosenberger homestead. Now there were 6 adults living under William and Sally's roof, including 2 Raymonds and 2 Sallys. To avoid some confusion, Raymond Rosenberger was called Rosie, while Raymond Hackman was called Hacky. Most families in the late 1700s had their own cow to provide for their milk needs. If you were lucky, you might even have had 2 family cows. Then, as industrialization moved people into more urban areas, where houses and properties were smaller, there just wasn't anywhere to keep a family cow. And lives were getting busier too. So instead of providing their own milk, people began to buy milk from local dairy farmers. This instigated the growth in the number of farmers in the area transitioning into dairy farming. Dairy farming really took off in Hatfield after the railroad was built through the area with 3 stations established in the township. The new railroad provided farmers with a quick, inexpensive means of transporting their perishable products to the dairy-hungry people of Philadelphia. Some dairy farmers established milk delivery businesses, making daily deliveries of milk and milk products to those on their route. Joseph Waite, who lived in Hilltown Township, not far from the Hatfield Township line, was one of those who had established a dairy delivery route in the area. This bottle reads W.D. Waite and is likely from a relative of Joseph's who operated a dairy farm. Unfortunately, in 1925, Joseph Waite became ill and was forced to put his route up for sale. This caught the eye of William Rosenberger, who liked the idea of having a second business, a farm and a dairy. One he could leave to his son Raymond, and one he could leave to his son-in-law Raymond Hackman. So William, along with his son Raymond, purchased the milk route and started a dairy business on the Bergy Road farm. This photo shows the Bergy farm around 1925 when the dairy was started. And this is the original dairy building. William and Raymond would deliver milk and milk products produced from their own cows by means of a horse and wagon, like this one here on the right. On the left is an early Rosenberger's milk bottle that is on display in the Hatfield History Museum. In the winter, when necessary, a horse-pulled sled, like the one seen here, was used to navigate the snow-covered streets of their route. Incidentally, the Rosenberger's wagon seen here was sold at auction in 2017 for $6,900, and the sled was sold for $1,150. By 1936, families had grown in the Rosenberger home with the birth of one child, Roland, to Eva and Raymond, and 4 children, Mildred, William, Marcus, and Arlene, to Raymond and Sally. The Rosenberger house had become quite congested with a total population of 11. When an 11-acre farm at the corner of 40-foot Road and Coffle Road was put up for sale by George Heckler, Raymond and Sally saw it as a great opportunity to move and have more space for their growing family. That's 40-foot road there running horizontal across the photo. It was soon decided that Raymond Rosie Rosenberger would take over the dairy business at his new property, and Raymond Hackey Hackman would take over the farm business at the Bergy Road farm. Hackey was quite fine with this arrangement, as he never really enjoyed the dairy business and the truck driving that was required with it anyway. William would retire and just sit and enjoy life in his rocking chair, something he had long wanted to do. Raymond and Sally's new property at 40-foot Road and Coffle Road consisted of little more than a house, a garage, and a chicken house. Raymond soon put up a few additional buildings and transformed the chicken house into a cooler. And this business here is the dairy building. In 1936, the Rosenbergers Dairies business was officially incorporated, and the second generation of the business was begun. On its first day of operation, Rosenberger's Dairies sold 117 quarts of milk. Here's a different view of Raymond's new dairy property. Here's 40-foot Road, and this is Coffle Road. This photo shows the new dairy building as it appeared in 1936. Notice the size of the arborvitae bushes in front of the building. This photo was obviously taken a number of years later, as the arborvitae bushes are quite a bit larger. That's Raymond Rosenberger standing in front of his dairy building. The dairy at this time was buying its milk from area dairy farmers, including Hackey's Bergy Road farm, and soon Raymond was expanding their delivery business by purchasing other area milk routes. In Pennsylvania, mandatory dairy pasteurization laws were established with the enacting of the Milk Sanitation Law of 1935. The milk pasteurization process killed harmful microorganisms, ensuring the milk's safety and extending its shelf life. Rosenberger's Dairies started pasteurizing its milk in 1938 to make it safer to drink. Homogenization soon followed, which further extended the shelf life of the milk. Rosenberger's Dairies started to homogenize its milk in 1943. Also by this time, horse and wagon delivery was abandoned and replaced with 2 trucks, maybe looking something like this. One truck was for Raymond's Lansdale route, and one truck was driven by Vernon Miniger to deliver milk on his route in Hatfield Borough and in the Orvilla section of Hatfield Township. Customers would place their orders with the milkman, and he would bring their order the next day. Some homes had a box sitting on the porch for the milk bottles to keep the milk out of the morning sunlight, because milk exposed to sunlight could cause the milk to spoil quickly, leading to an off flavor, and it could also affect the nutrients in the milk. It was not uncommon during a cold winter morning for a bottle of milk to start to freeze before being taken inside. This caused a separation in the milk, with the cream rising to the top, and when frozen, to push through the top of the bottle. This frozen cream was a highly sought-after treat for many. I have read, however, that if the frozen milk was not left in a box, that birds often would get to the frozen cream first, since they apparently also enjoyed its taste. Some birds would even tear through the foil caps of unfrozen bottles to get to the milk inside. Back in that time, it was a much more trusting environment, and many homes never even bothered to lock their doors. So sometimes the milkman was invited to enter the front door while the home's occupants slept, place the milk order into the refrigerator, and take the payment and empty milk bottles from the kitchen table. In this way, the family would be ready to enjoy a nice cold glass of milk along with their breakfast. The Raymond Rosenberger family continued to grow as Sally gave birth to 6 more children, bringing the total to 10. Incidentally, all 10 of the children were given the middle name of Landis, their mother's maiden name, which was a common practice in some families back then. Being the oldest boys of the flock, William and Marcus were soon helping out at the dairy, mixing chocolate milk, loading milk cans, boxing eggs, and keeping the dairy clean. Raymond, being a stickler for cleanliness, even had the boys wash down the sidewalks around the dairy every Saturday afternoon. William F. Rosenberger, the founder of the family's dairy business, died on July 1, 1942, at the age of 68, about 5 years after he retired. He is interred in the Plains Mennonite Meeting House Cemetery. William had lost his wife Sally 6 years earlier, not long after he had retired. When the United States entered World War II in 1941, mass production of home freezers was discontinued since all metal was needed for the war effort and factories were converting to wartime production. This created a shortage of home freezers, which were a rather new invention at that time, having just been introduced in the United States market in 1940. And since the commercial frozen food industry was still in its infancy, many folks still relied on the food raised in their home gardens and in wartime victory gardens to fill their tables through the winter. Commercial freezer lockers provided a way for families to freeze the produce they harvested. In 1945, Raymond Rosenberger took this opportunity to take his converted chicken house cooler building and transform it into a frozen meat locker, and to also start Rosenberger's Lockers, providing frozen food storage lockers to the community. Rosenberger Lockers was later expanded into Rosenberger Cold Storage, as we will hear about in a little bit. Rosenberger's dairies again modernized their home delivery vehicles with the purchase of Divco trucks in 1946. These trucks were specially designed for route delivery drivers who stopped frequently and needed to get in and out of the truck quickly. These trucks were more modern, but they still lacked refrigeration, so the practice of using ice to keep the products cold during delivery continued. Working 14-hour days, Raymond Rosenberger's business thrived. It didn't hurt that folks at this time were leaving the bustling city of Philadelphia in droves for the peacefulness of suburban life. Spurred by the improvements made to the old Bethlehem Pike, which became U.S. Route 309, and the completion of the northeast extension of the Pennsylvania Turnpike in the 1950s, the decade of the 50s saw the population of Hatfield Township doubling to around 6,000 residents. Hatfield's neighboring townships also saw similar growth during this time. As they became of age, Raymond taught his boys the ropes of the business, giving them small jobs to do. This also worked towards keeping them busy and out of trouble. In the early 1950s, at about the age of 8, Henry Rosenberger was put to work in the dairy by his father, who gave him small jobs like putting caps on milk bottles, bagging ice for the milk trucks, and packing eggs into boxes. Later, Henry was none too happy when he found out that his father was buying unboxed eggs when he could have purchased them already in boxes at virtually no extra cost, just to keep Henry busy with something to do. Insulated milk boxes for porches became popular in the 1950s, with home delivery of milk peaking during this time. These boxes were an essential part of many households in order to keep their milk cool and safe and out of the sun. Sadly, on July 5th of 1953, Raymond and Sally Rosenberger lost their daughter Arlene after she was involved in a tragic auto accident. The car, driven by her friend, 16-year-old Geraldine Castle, went out of control while driving on what was then known as the Doylestown-Quakertown Road, the present Route 313, and crashed into a house. Arlene died just 5 days before she would have celebrated her 18th birthday. In 1956, Raymond Rosenberger incorporated the dairy business with his two oldest sons, Marcus and William, with Bill being assigned to the position of route foreman and Mark assigned to the position of manager of the dairy. Raymond applied most of his energy to growing the business, bit by bit acquiring smaller area dairy businesses. He was also somewhat of a micromanager. He typically awoke at 2 a.m., the same time as his hired drivers, and went over to the dairy to make sure that everything was as it should be. He would sometimes work until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, but his wife Sally would always wait up for her husband to return home before retiring for the night. In 1958, Raymond's concern for preserving the area's spiritual heritage led him to become a trustee of the Fricks Meeting House and Burial Grounds on Orvilla Road. The burial grounds at Fricks at that time held the earthly remains of at least 79 of his Rosenberger relatives. Raymond and Sally soon purchased 4.5 acres of land on the south side of the meeting house so that residential development would not encroach on the site's long-standing natural beauty. This post photo, taken for a newspaper advertisement, shows milkman Ralph Ruth making a milk delivery to his own home on West Broad Street in Hatfield Borough. That's his wife, Nanalie Ruth, better known as Nan, standing in the doorway. The UL phone number indicates that this photo was taken around 1960. Prior to 1961, Rosenberger's milk supplying dairy farmers would put their milk in a milk can like this one seen here. Rosenbergers would then pick up these cans of milk each morning for processing. That changed in 1961 when Rosenbergers purchased their first milk tank truck. The milk suppliers were also required to install milk tanks on their farms to store their milk. This made the milk transfer from farm to truck and truck to dairy much more efficient. Also in the early 1960s, Rosenberger's got its first gallon processing machine, making Rosenberger's milk available in gallon-sized jugs. That's plant employee John Yoder working on the new machine. Another change in milk packaging occurred during the 1960s with the use of Pure-Pak milk cartons that we are all familiar with. Here we see milk being packaged in 1/2 pint Pure-Pak milk cartons. Pure-Pak cartons, known for their gable-top design, are made to be user-friendly and convenient for products such as milk and juice. Here we see chocolate milk being packaged. And here we see milk being packaged in 1/2 gallon Pure-Pak cartons. By the 1960s, Rosenberger's Dairies was churning out 10,000 quarts of milk each day, and Raymond was earning more money than his family needed for comfortable living. So Raymond began a career in financial aid to the needy, much of it under the table, since he had no desire to be in the limelight because of his generosity. Sometimes his philanthropic giving amounted to half of his income. It was Raymond's strong financial position that allowed him to make what was quite a controversial move in his career as a Hatfield community supporter. Not far from the dairy property was a large piece of land that was home to the Montgomery County Fairgrounds, Norman Moyer's weekly livestock auctions, and the Hatfield Speedway. Although it had started as a horse racing track in 1925, the Hatfield Speedway became a place that was regularly filled with noisy, souped-up automobiles. For years, Raymond gritted his teeth and endured the noise and dust that the cars created while racing around the 1/2-mile dirt oval. And after a night of racing had ended, he also had to endure the sound of excited drivers revving their engines and squealing their tires right outside of his home. Then, in 1964, George Marshman, the owner of the Hatfield Speedway, lost his son Bobby Marshman in a racing car accident, resulting in Marshman losing all interest in racing. Seeing this, Raymond Rosenberger made the grieving father an offer to buy the property, which was eventually accepted. The last race at Hatfield Speedway was held on September 24, 1966, after which Raymond soon had the property cleared with a bulldozer. This was, however, not a popular move, as many folks from Hatfield and the surrounding areas found the Speedway to be a great source of excitement and community pride. The year 1965 saw Rosenbergers dairies branching out by adding iced tea and lemonade to their product line. By the late 1960s, the widespread adoption of in-home refrigerators and the increased popularity of shopping at supermarkets led to the slow decline of milk delivery. Although Rosenberger's dairies still made home deliveries, their customer base was shifting more to commercial businesses. Also in the late 1960s, Raymond Rosenberger wanted to close the frozen food locker business that he had started back in 1945, but his son Bill felt that it continued to have the makings of a profitable business in connection with the dairy. Then in 1970, the Rosenberger brothers, Bill, Mark, and Henry, had the original frozen food locker building demolished, and in its place, the brothers oversaw the construction of a 3,000 square foot freezer building beside the dairy, marking the beginning of the Rosenberger cold storage business. The freezer space in this facility was soon filled by the demand for cold storage by local meat packers and food processors who needed space for their products. Also in 1970, a retail store operation was built on the Coffle Road property next to the dairy. The retail convenience store, the Dairy Wagon Shop, sold meat in addition to ice cream, milk, and other dairy products and convenience items. In 1972, 2 years after Rosenberger Cold Storage was formed, the Rosenberger brothers incorporated the business as a new company separate from the Rosenberger's dairy business. Henry Rosenberger took over management of his father's cold storage business as president, while brothers Bill and Mark continued on with the operation of the dairy business. At this time, 1972, freezer lockers were still renting for $12 a year. Rosenberger's Cold Storage also branched out to offering custom meat cutting to keep those lockers stocked with chops and steaks. But times were changing, and an increasing number of people were now able to purchase their own home freezers, avoiding the trip to the community freezer. Also, fewer people were gardening and freezing their own fruits and vegetables, looking instead to the supermarkets as a source of their frozen foods instead of storing their own. Meanwhile, food producers in the Hatfield area, including Keller's Creamery, Moyer Packing Company, and Longacre Poultry, were growing to meet the needs of the area's rapidly rising population and their expanding customer base. These businesses then faced the decision of whether to build their own freezer storage facilities or continue to haul their products to one of the cold storage facilities in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, these Philadelphia facilities were quite antiquated, and the cost of utilizing them was rising quickly. So the 1970s were a time ripe with possibility for a visionary new cold storage business in the Montgomery County suburbs to meet this growing need for cold storage. And Henry Rosenberger took this opportunity to expand the Rosenberger cold storage facility on Coffle Road from the original 3,000 square feet to 50,000 square feet. And the company now provided blast freezing and cold transportation services as well. Jeff Rosenberger, the son of Mark Rosenberger, also got an early start in the dairy business. At around the age of 13, he was put to work putting school milk cartons into cases, stacking empties when returned to the dairy, and bagging ice for the milk trucks. He became an official employee of the dairy in July of 1973. You may notice in this photo of Jeff that he is inspecting a half-gallon carton of milk with the Acme brand name on it. Rosenbergers didn't normally package milk under other brands, but this was a one-time limited production run for the business. And here's Jeff's dad, Mark Rosenberger, holding up one of the special run cartons of milk. In January of 1977, after suffering a stroke, Raymond Rosenberger retired from the dairy business. He couldn't imagine how the business could possibly be successful without him and advised his sons to sell the business. But Bill and Mark decided to continue the business with Bill as president and Mark as secretary and treasurer. Also in 1977, the trustees of Frick's Meeting House and Burial Grounds, which included several members of the Rosenberger family, I believe, purchased an additional 11.5 acres of adjoining land, fulfilling Raymond's 1958 vision of maintaining the natural beauty of the site. Rosenberger's Dairies expanded its service area in 1978 with the purchase of a dairy in Westchester County. This was the first expansion of the dairy outside of Montgomery County. In the late 70s, Rosenberger's Dairies replaced its standard postal mailbox with a very unique, attention-grabbing milk carton mailbox. From what I understand, it was made by Display and Sign Center, not far away in Line, Lexington. It wasn't long, though, before this mailbox fell victim to vandals who stole it and left it in pieces in a nearby field. It was soon replaced by a low-fat milk mailbox, which enjoyed a long life on 40-foot road. Although the need for commercial freezer space was growing by leaps and bounds at this time, the need for residential freezer space continued to decline as less families were keeping home gardens and more were enjoying the convenience of frozen foods from their area supermarkets. At its peak, Rosenberger Cold Storage had 600 frozen food lockers available to the community, but because of dwindling demand, that number was reduced to 400 in 1970. Instead of closing up the community locker when things started going south, Henry Rosenberger decided to ease out of the outdated community locker service a bit at a time through the 1970s, rather than close it up altogether. By the end of the 70s, though, the community frozen food locker was discontinued and became just a part of history. Some of you, I'm sure, remember the Rosenberger's Dairy Store on Route 29 in Red Hill. Back in the early 1980s, Rosenberger's Dairies produced its own ice cream at its Red Hill store. This photo from around 1981 shows employees working on ice cream production at the Red Hill plant. Rosenberger's only produced its own ice cream for several years, after which Nelson's Ice Cream made the product for them, under the Rosenbergers Dairy brand name. By 1979, Raymond Rosenberger's health was not that good, having continually declined ever since suffering a stroke in 1976. He was moved into the nursing wing of the Hatfield Mennonite home on the Bethlehem Pike, where his wife Sally eventually joined him. Later, Raymond was transferred to Dock Terrace, and after several years of moving back and forth between the two facilities, Raymond, at the age of 77, departed this life on June 20th, 1983. He was buried in the cemetery at Plains Mennonite Church on the edge of Hatfield Township. In 1980, ice manufacturing and packaging was added to the production capacity of the Rosenberger cold storage plant on Coffell Road. By 1983, Rosenberger Cold Storage was still seeing significant business growth as there continued to be a great demand in the area for high-quality services in frozen warehousing. So Henry Rosenberger constructed a second plant, this one on Berge Road, right across the street from the original Rosenberger homestead. This second plant was a 64,000 square foot facility. The area food producers mentioned earlier, Keller's Creamery, Moyer Packing Company, and Longacre Poultry, were among those to enjoy this new high-quality cold storage facility. Even Philadelphia's Tasty Cake Factory sent their products up to Hatfield to take advantage of its efficient new cold storage building. This photo is from the 1983 ribbon cutting ceremony held for the new plant number 2. That's Henry Rosenberger, third from the right, with his brothers Bill and Mark next to him. Plant number 2 was soon expanded at a very rapid pace. The following year, 1984, the facility was expanded to 110,000 square feet, and in 1985, 50,000 square feet were added to complete the plant, with a total of 177,500 square feet of space. In 1984, Rosenberger Cold Transport was formed. This company provided a service for distributing products in a consolidated freight program throughout the northeastern United States. These services fulfilled a vital need for meat packers, food processors, bakeries, food distributors, and importers and exporters in the Philadelphia area who were receiving and shipping their goods to the entire world. Ever since dairies started using plastic crates in the 1960s to ship their milk, folks have found that they were also great for home storage and decoration. These cases work great for record album storage, as bookcases and tables, and for construction workers to hold the tools in their trucks, as well as many other uses. Dairies were finding that many of their crates were disappearing. In 1987, a new Pennsylvania law made it illegal to possess dairy-owned milk crates, with violators subject to a $300 fine or 3 months in prison. Bill Rosenberger, president of Rosenberger's Dairies, said that the company at that time was buying 61,000 new milk cases each year, and by year's end, 10%, that's 6,100 cases, were missing, cutting into the dairy's profits. In 1987, Henry Rosenberger built a second building, plant number 3, on his Berge Road property, which was dedicated to the distribution segment of his warehouse service. The new plant, over 130,000 square feet in size, offered expanded rail-to-truck services and consolidated services in the northeastern United States. In 1988, Rosenberger Cold Storage continued to grow, this time beyond the Hatfield area. That year, the company constructed Delaware Cold Storage, a modern 112,000 square foot single-story facility at the port of Wilmington. This facility marked the entrance of the business as an importer-exporter. The following year, Henry purchased the South Central Pennsylvania Freezer Storage Company in York, Pennsylvania, changed its name to York Cold Storage, and expanded the facility to over 145,000 square feet. By the late 1980s, with the changing lifestyles of that time, the frozen food industry was booming, with people ever more eager to try new products from their grocers' freezers. This created a great demand for commercial freezer space. By 1991, in order to fulfill this ever-growing demand for commercial freezer space, Rosenberger Cold Storage Plant No. 3 on Berge Road was expanded by 100,000 square feet, bringing the total square footage of that facility to over 230,000. This expansion completed the development plans at the Berge Road site. And you can see the original Rosenberger farm there on Berge Road. Sally Rosenberger, mother of the Rosenberger brothers, continued to live at the Hatfield Mennonite home for 8 years after her husband died in 1983. Then, in 1992, while recuperating in Dock Terrace following surgery on her knee, Sally was diagnosed with cancer. Within only a matter of weeks, Sally, the mother of 10 children, grandmother to 26, and great-grandmother to a flock of 21 children, died on Valentine's Day, 1992. She was buried alongside of her husband in the cemetery at Plains Mennonite Church. The Rosenbergers Dairies business had continued to grow over the years from a single farm operation started in 1925 to the point that by 1993 they were receiving milk from more than 60 dairy farms in the Delaware Valley. In 1995, Rosenbergers Dairies added herbal mint tea and decaffeinated lemon tea to their product line, and a year later started producing several of their products in gallon containers, including iced tea, diet iced tea, and orange and raspberry coolers. The 1987 law making it illegal to possess a dairy's plastic milk crate was apparently not very successful in curbing the pilfering of the cases. In 1995, Rosenbergers reported that they had paid $100,000 to replace milk cases that were stolen that year. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Most of us are familiar with this unofficial motto of the U.S. Postal Service from days gone by, but which doesn't really seem to apply any longer. Anyway, a simpler, shorter phrase, "the milk goes through," was once used by a 49-year veteran milkman to summarize the commitment of milkmen to make their deliveries regardless of the circumstances, come rain or shine, heat or cold. This motto was especially challenging during unusually heavy snowfall events like the blizzards of 1978 and 1996. One way or another, the drivers had to find a way to get their trucks to the farms to pick up milk, and milkmen had to negotiate deep snow-covered streets to ensure that the milk got through. This blizzard of 1978 photo shows West Broad Street in Hatfield Borough with Bethany Church on the right. Now, not all roads in the area were this good, but Hatfield Borough has a long-standing reputation for clearing streets quickly following snowfalls. In 1996, 500,000 pounds of Rosenberger ice, which is 250 tons, was shipped to Atlanta, Georgia to help Olympic food vendors keep their food cold. Rosenbergers had supplied ice for big events in the past, but nothing quite as important as the Olympics. Another 300,000 pounds of Rosenberger ice, which is 150 tons, was shipped for the Paralympics, which was held a week after the regular Olympics. At that time, Rosenberger Ice, a division of Rosenberger Cold Storage, was producing 160 tons of ice each day. That same year, 1998, Bill and Mark Rosenberger both decided that they too wanted to have more time to pursue other interests, so they appointed Bill Pfeiffer to President and Chief Executive Officer of Rosenberger's dairies. Also in 1998, Henry Rosenberger decided that the time was right for him to retire, and he sold his Rosenberger Cold Storage Companies to CSI Cold Storage. At this time, the Rosenberger Cold Storage Companies had more than 20 million cubic feet of refrigerated and frozen warehouse space in Pennsylvania, and 23 refrigerated warehouses and distribution centers nationwide, totaling 94 million cubic feet of space. And they were doing $37 million worth of business that year. Another part of the Rosenberger's Dairies business that I hadn't given a thought to but was reminded of while doing research for this program was the vending machines. Rosenberger started selling its products in vending machines in the late 1950s, and at the high point of vending machine use, they had about 1,000 machines, but by 1999, that number had reduced to around 400 machines. That same year, 1999, Rosenberger's Dairies began a major expansion of its Hatfield plant, which was completed in 2000, Rosenberger's 75th anniversary. The expansion brought the total square feet in the plant up to 60,000 and daily production to 50,000 gallons. The year 2000 marked the 75th anniversary of the founding of Rosenberger's Dairies, and they went all out to celebrate this wonderful milestone. A new milk carton mailbox was made that contained the 75th anniversary logo, and a community celebration day was planned. Bill and Mark Rosenberger were still chairman of the business at this time, and Rosenberger's Dairies had customers in parts of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey, serving them through state-of-the-art processing and computer tracking. That's Bill and Mark toasting to the 75th anniversary of their company, with milk, of course. A new pasteurization system, including new tanks, were installed at the dairy in 2001. The new system provided for product packaging at a cooler temperature, which further improved quality, flavor, and shelf life of the products. New pasteurized drinks and fruit juices, including peach tea, were added to the product line that year. Some of the dairy's customers with strong sales at this time included Clemens and Giant supermarkets, Eckerd and CVS drugstores, Mobil, Exxon, and Amoco service stations, and the North Penn School District. On July 17, 2001, a big house fire occurred in Hatfield Township with multiple fire companies responding. The Volunteer Medical Service Corps also responded to provide a rehabilitation station for the firefighters, supplying cold drinks and cold towels to the firefighters. It was extremely hot that day with temperatures above 90 degrees, and the supply of cold water, ice, and towels was soon depleted. After a quick phone call, Rosenberger employees came through and quickly responded with enough water, drinks, and ice to get them through the afternoon. This photo from 2001 shows a Rosenberger milkman, known only as Cliff, making a delivery to a home on his route in Ballackinwood. In addition to milk, Cliff also delivered butter, eggs, orange juice, and more to his customers. Cliff said that about 90% of his customers preferred their milk in glass bottles over plastic or the Pure Pak cartons because they felt that milk just tasted better in glass. At that time, home delivery accounted for only 5% of Rosenberger's business, but was believed to be the only company in this part of the country that still did home delivery. But both home delivery and glass bottles were soon discontinued. The increased number of large grocery stores and convenience stores made it easier and more convenient for people to buy milk on their own instead of having it delivered, making the demand for home delivery so low that it just was not practical anymore. Missing plastic milk crates continued to be a significant problem for Rosenberger's Dairies into the early 2000s and were considered a substantial financial loss factor for the business. This photo shows mountains of crates filled with products in the Rosenberger warehouse. In 2002, Bill and Mark Rosenberger, chairman and secretary-treasurer of the Rosenbergers Dairy Company respectively, both decided to retire and enjoy more personal time. That year, they sold the business to milk giant Crowley Foods, a subsidiary of H.P. Hood. Although under new ownership, the business continued to operate under the Rosenberger name, manufacturing its line of dairy products and beverages. At that time, the company was employing approximately 260 people at its 3 locations in Hatfield, Levittown, and Westchester. Rosenberger's product line at that time also included specialty drinks, cottage cheese, ricotta cheese, cream, and a selection of white chocolate, strawberry, and cappuccino milk in a variety of sizes from half pint to gallon. Rosenberger's was selling approximately 10,000 gallons of iced tea and 1,000 gallons of lemonade each day. In addition to the sale of the dairy in 2002, the community was also quite surprised and disappointed to learn that the Dairy Wagon shop was to be closed as well. For over 30 years, the Dairy Wagon was loved for its fresh meats, sandwiches, ice cream, and Rosenberger drinks. In late 2002, it was also announced that the assets of Rosenberger's Ice Cream, a division of Rosenberger's Dairies, was being transferred to Nelson's Ice Cream of Royersford. Nelson's Ice Cream, which was started back in 1935, had been supplying ice cream for Rosenberger's Dairies for over 10 years. In October 2014, H.P. Hood sold Rosenberger's Dairies to Balfour Farms. With the acquisition, Balfour moved Rosenberger's product production out of Hatfield and to other facilities it operated, but they continued to utilize Rosenberger's Hatfield distribution. The company promised that, even though the production was moved out of Hatfield, consumers would see no change in the availability of the Rosenberger products that they had come to love. In July 2016, Balfour scheduled an auction to sell everything on the property associated with milk processing, but the auction was canceled and the production equipment remained in the building. Soon after, in 2017, the former Rosenberger's Dairies property was acquired by Lucerne Foods, who brought the processing of dairy products back to Hatfield, primarily focusing, according to the internet, on milk products, eggnog, and cream products such as half and half, coffee cream, and various creams. And speaking of eggnog, I wasn't able to nail down just when Rosenbergers added it to their product line, but here's a picture of eggnog delivery on its way to the Stevens household during the 1996 holiday season. We love our eggnog. Almost 2 years ago, in December of 2023, I was contacted by a man who owned the business that purchased the Rosenberger's Dairies Westchester building in 2010. He wrote that his family all grew up drinking Rosenberger's milk from the time they were in grade school. He also wrote that after purchasing the building, they had removed the Rosenberger sign from the outside wall of the building and had it restored. He then had it mounted on the wall of the president's office as a tribute to Rosenberger's history in their community since 1978. It stayed there for 13 years, but by the end of 2023, they had decided to sell the building and were now looking for a good home for the sign. Unfortunately, the sign was just too big for the Hatfield History Museum, but we did find a new place for the sign in the home of Bill Rosenberger's daughter, Tina Rosenberger Rhodes. And back in the spring of this year, I received a message from one of our members, George Landis, who sent me this photo. The Rosenberger's Dairy milk carton mailbox, made in 2000 for their 75th anniversary, all ready to be dropped into a dumpster. It seems that Lucerne was doing a bit of spring cleaning, and this was to be trashed. Fortunately, before it was tipped into the dumpster, George stopped them and contacted me to see if the Hatfield History Museum would be interested in it. Of course, we said sure. It was a bit dirty, but in pretty good condition, except that it was missing the top piece of the carton. Society member Bill Miller, our master woodworking craftsman, got to work replacing the missing piece, and the milk box is now on display in the Hatfield History Museum. Come and see it sometime. Today, Rosenberger's Dairy's products continue to be produced at various processing plants in Pennsylvania, and Rosenberger's brands of drinks can still be found in refrigerated cases in many locations throughout Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. And new products continue to be added to the Rosenberger product line. In fact, most recently, 12-ounce shelf-stable cans of iced teas, lemonade, and energy iced teas requiring no refrigeration were just launched in April of this year. So that's a history of the Rosenberger family and their Hatfield businesses. I hope that you have enjoyed this program. Thank you for watching.